Hello and welcome back to another exciting episode on Solving the People Puzzle, where every week bring you valuable content from valuable guests around everything people. Because the idea of Solving the People Puzzle is to bring insights into the HR community to help you on a daily basis implement practical tools, tips, and techniques. I have today with me Kim Moore. Kim, how's it? How are you doing?
I'm very well, Francois. Lovely to have you. Lovely to be with you today.
Fantastic. It is lovely to have you. It is lovely to have you here. It's great to be here with you and to have a conversation today around upskilling and reskilling the workforce. But before we dive into the topic, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. So my name's Kim Moore. Currently look after a whole lot of HR business partners within Dimension Data and NTT. And very much a generalist across multiple areas of HR. I've been with my current organization for over 17 years. I've got a lot of HR business partner experience.
Incredible, Kim. I just have to double down on that. I can imagine the Gen Zs in the audience going, "What? 17 years you've been with one logo? Why are you crazy?" Nothing against Didi, by the way.
No, absolutely, for sure. So I've been on a journey. I've worked for other entities. I was with Sun International for a bit as well. And the only reason I am still with this entity is that I never stop learning, and it's never boring.
Wow.
I learn new things all the time. I've changed roles. I've moved cities. I've looked after different territories, different countries, but really you feel part of a global organization, but being part of South Africa and being in South Africa. And I just find that I'm able to keep doing what I love doing, which is this practice.
You know, and here's our first golden nugget audience around solving the people puzzle. When this conversation comes up around, people leave every 18 months and there's this research around retention and engagement and attraction, et cetera, et cetera. The conversation never really is about leaving. It's around what is happening while I'm there. And I love what you just said. I don't care about the number. It's about continuous improvement, continuous learning, new challenges, new opportunities, the ability to grow, move cities, which in turn, is challenging and increasing your efficiency, your competence, your knowledge, your skills. And so why would you then want to leave if that is happening in an environment, I guess, that you love and enjoy?
Exactly. So I don't feel like I definitely haven't stagnated. Even in the last year, I've learned multiple new skills, being able to explore multiple different areas. And if not, why not? I've also realized that I've had a lot of global exposure as well to other HR practitioners all over the globe. And what's so exciting for me is the amount of, I'm in tech, obviously, but the amount of skills in the HR community and in the technical industry that we have here in South Africa. One of the reasons being, obviously, our labor legislation is quite progressive and strict, but it does create massive opportunity for us as well. And we really are, we really are up there with some of the top professionals.
Yeah, I love that. I don't remember how long ago, but a couple of episodes ago, we had a pod with Professor Dieter Veldsman, who's now in the Netherlands, and he was speaking about we would be surprised at what level our HR fraternity is when compared to global perspective. And not everybody has got the opportunity to work for a multinational to gain that perspective, but it's great to hear from you working for this massive organization that we don't have to stand back, right?
We definitely don't. And just on the topic a little bit, I know it's a big hot topic at the moment in terms of diversity and inclusion. That's something that is so natural to us as an organization. And even from a learning point of view, I know we're talking about upskilling and learning, but it's so inherent in our DNA, skills development, planning for training, planning for learning, investing in people. It's just what we do. It's not really an afterthought. It's one of our core things that we need to do. It's a legislative requirement. So we definitely are ahead of the curve in a lot of areas.
I immediately, and for the audience listening to this 2 years later from now, we are in the middle of the Rugby World Cup, and I immediately go to sports, and I think resilience, continuous learning, adapting, change. It's in our DNA as South Africans to just continuously work at it, show that resilience, because things don't always come that easy, and we've just inherited this or embodied this natural, like, we will make it work. and we can see that trickling down through, as you said, the different layers right down to the individual level. But let's get into the topic: upskilling and
Yes.
reskilling our workforce. I can imagine an audience member going, okay, well, this is boring, or what does this mean? But what we're going to try and do today is to contextualize three things: the importance of continuous learning in the workplace. So why should we do it? Albeit that it might happen more natural to some and to others, but from a strategic perspective, why are we doing it? Strategies for implementing programs around this. So how can we go about doing it? Which is really where I'm hoping we can share with the audience some practical tips and tools. And then lastly, where is the opportunity for tech in this? You mentioned earlier, of course, you're in tech. We're in tech. Tech is everywhere. So that's the agenda for today's discussion. Should we kick it off, Kim? In your opinion, the importance of continuous learning.
So I was reflecting just in a little bit of preparation, and I was reflecting on what I said 17 years ago. At the time, I mean, I was never particularly passionate about IT. I just ended up in that industry. And I used to say to young technical people coming out of university, look, you've chosen a career that's going to require continuous learning and upskilling. You are going to require to learn until you retire. I mean, you know that. So there's a lot of international certifications. They've been refreshed and renewed all the time. And based on the last, 5-10 years, I've rethought that. And it's certainly not just for people in the tech industry. I include myself. If you're going to stay relevant, you have to upskill yourself. You have to push the boundaries. Your change, there's never going to be too much change. Change is happening. It's happening all the time.
Yes.
Whether you want it or not, it's happening around us all the time. But how do we adapt to it? And a lot of it has to do with self-growth and running that for yourself. So without a doubt, if you're going to, it's a ticket to the game.
Yes.
To be learning, and that's not only for technical people anymore. I would say that that's everyone, from a receptionist all the way a kitchen worker, FD. Everyone requires that sort of commitment to growing.
I was at a conference last week where the keynote was, one of the keynotes was around the AI and machine learning and all of this, and these typical comments around, oh, it's going to take my work, and am I going to become irrelevant? And the speaker said this profound thing. They said, it's the future is for the individuals who learn to work with it, adapt with it, and then grow, continuously learn, not just the technical side, but the self-awareness side, the curiosity, the intuition, the interpersonal skills, the intrapersonal skills. And that, for me, when I listened to that, I was like, this is not talking to a particular job. Exactly what you're saying now. It's not just for IT. In fact, we were having an internal conversation yesterday saying, I can imagine with the incredible momentum that is happening in the tech space at the moment, the current tech landscape might look vastly different in about a year, 2 years time from now, like just from a job description perspective in the tech space. So yeah, I completely agree with you. It's continuous learning on a human level.
Yes, it is on a human level. It's definitely on a human level. We've got very sustainable rooms.
Okay, there
and
we
the
go.
lights go off automatically.
That's so good.
If you sit too still. I agree with you. I think AI is really going to be there to do the things that we're not particularly good at, to support us, to do things faster, or things that we don't particularly enjoy. But I do think that the humanities across the board, at the moment I'm busy reading a book on anthropology in the workplace, and I really believe that is going to be the differentiator, is how do you work with that? I mean, I also speak to, over the years, I've partnered a lot with various universities, and we will have various engagements with universities about what their content should be about, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, I've said to them, because I want to be as recent and it must be relevant content. But in the tech space, you cannot expect that. So whatever someone's going to learn at university or Technicon, they're certainly not going to use that in the workplace. I mean, we are trying new technologies all the time. We're learning on the go. So you're going to have to teach, you need to teach problem solving, you need to teach curiosity. Those are the skills, and then this love for learning. And how do you do that? That's fairly self-paced.
Yeah. And the how we'll get into a second, but a last comment on that is I choose to look at this from a perspective of total optimism and enjoyment and curiosity, to go, thank goodness the technology is progressing at such a rate that the mundane, repetitive tasks that often fill up 60-70% of typical jobs days will take that part over, freeing up the human to be more human,
Yes.
to build those relationships, to solve those problems that the machines can't, to be the curious individual who's forever trying to seek nuance and link dots that seemingly don't connect. I think that's going to open up just such a new level of being human in the world of work that we've never seen before.
We've never seen before. And being in, I mean, I often say to people, I read people for a living. I mean, that's effectively what HR is. And as much as we can rely on AI, the human individual is just too complex. There will always be things that you won't be able to assess or whatever. And there is still so much value in building relationships, talking to people, just building those intimacy. I mean, just something as simple as engagement, as employee engagement. I'm still a strong believer, as much as we have all this remote working and whatever we have available, employee engagement is about eyeballing and about being face-to-face and connecting with people at a human level. And you just can't do that neurologically through a screen.
No, you can't. Entirely different episode. You can go back to it, audience, if you want to, but I did one around Whamley being back in the office Monday to Friday, exactly for that point. But let's not go down that rabbit hole again. So with this being said then, Kim, what are effective, relevant strategies for implementing learning programs? And if you don't mind, if you're allowed to, I'd love to hear one or two examples from Dimension Data's perspective. Because, I often look at L&D and I go, one, is it relevant to the requirements of the job? Why are we sending everybody on EQ, as an example, courses if you're an individual contributor, etc.? So where is the world now in terms of learning strategies?
So look, everything is pretty much moved. We've moved pretty much away entirely from classroom-based. The only time classroom would really fall is if it's something that's very collaborative, and I'll explain that now. But everything is online, self-paced. You can do it when you need to do it. For us, from a skills analysis point of view, it's important that it's built into our HRM system. But our main one that we use is LinkedIn Learning. And then on top of that, we layer, whether it's Cisco, Microsoft, AWS, there's a huge amount of content. And all of our employees have access to it. 24/7, 365, and that content is updated all the time based on those vendors. I mean, there's an infinite amount. And what I will often say to graduates is, look, there is more than enough topics, which are very technical and very not, but you will never be able to learn enough. You will never get through all of it. You will never exceed our training budget. We have a huge emphasis on that because that's how we stay relevant in our industry.
And I was hoping you would say something in that line, because that would be my next question and comment is, it seems like for any sort of learning strategy to be effective, it should start with, this is a strategic initiative from the business. And your exact words, you'll never use up our budget. There's more than enough. It's in your hands. Go for it.
100%. And that's something that's remained fairly consistent throughout my time with NTT. And that's what makes it exciting. And I can tell you that that's philosophy right across our business. So it's not limited to South Africa. What is a little bit different in South Africa is just the tracking of training. And for that, we've actually built our own customized app called Learn. And effectively what it is it's more a supplier tool or procurement tool. So employees can go onto that. They can build a training plan on there. So it helps us with a skills development planning.
Of course.
And then what it does is then they can select any vendor. So we can even pay by credit card. as long as the manager has approved it, and then we pay this one vendor, and they do all the sub payments in the back end.
Okay.
Acknowledgements of debt, or if there are, it's not always relevant, are all built onto this platform. So it makes it fairly seamless for employee. And then obviously you must also make sure that your training is available as much as possible from a mobile point of view. So preferably on a cell phone, depending on the type of training as well.
Now, Kim, I can imagine this also takes a certain personality type to direct my own training. How does one look at this from the perspective? Because the traditional way was, listen, I'm your manager. I see certain gaps. You are going on this, or you have to do that. We've now moved, and I had a conversation the other day with Cello from Discovery, who's got a similar philosophy and mindset around self-directed, your pace, your time, mobile first. But what is your perspective around, I don't like learning, so is it okay? Or is there some sort of balance between, well, this is part of your growth and we actually need this for you for your job?
So, I mean, there will always be those odd individuals. I mean, also something that's quite different from a company point of view is we don't have a retirement date, so at all. So obviously there's benefits that change as you get older, but we have no retirement date.
So your 17 can become 37.
Exactly.
Years.
Exactly.
Okay.
So there's absolutely no retirement date. So it's really up to the individual. And from an HR perspective, that has its own complications, but that's for another episode. But from a learning point of view, it's definitely in our DNA. I mean, we do have some basic ethics, IT security, and all of that we kind of put under the compliance banner, and that is mandatory. Employees have set timelines and whatever that they have to complete. But generally, it is insistent. Every employee in our organization has to have a personal development plan, and that's globally, and that has to be captured. In fact, it's not even signed off by the manager. The manager can view it, and we can check if the person has submitted one or not. But every person has a personal development plan.
Wow.
And it could be that I'm going to read a book, or I'm going to improve my Excel skills. But definitely it's part of every conversation that needs to take place.
Sure.
So when we talk about bonuses and performance management and all of that, learning is definitely a priority in that, because for us to be able to, it's part of the culture. I don't think you're going to survive if you stagnate. It's just not going to be a culture fit for you.
I love that. My conversation with Sarah last week was around culture, and one of the key themes that we spoke about is it's this leadership behavior, and it's being simulated, and you can either be intentional or reactive about it. And because it's a global business, very familiar logo, when I step in as an employee, that culture exists. So I see around me people building their own PDPs. There's this culture around continuous development. I know that it will be part of a conversation when I do talk about my performance or my remuneration. And so it's a point of an employee coming in going, I need to fit into this, or actually this is not the environment for me.
Correct. So it's definitely part of the culture. And I've got a theory. I mean, we're always talking about data analytics and so on and so forth. And I've got a theory that we're always looking, there's been a lot of speak in HR circles about how do we, with attrition was fairly high a little while ago, how do we ensure, or what are the leading indicators that someone's disengaged and not going to, and potentially going to leave? And obviously our technical skills are quite critical. And one of the recent things that I've picked up, because we've got such this natural learning culture, and you as a manager are approving their learning, et cetera, especially the ones that have a cost, which is generally the international certifications, which is ultimately what most technical people will be aspiring to of some shape or form. If an employee has got no outstanding training debt, that for me is a leading indicator. Sure. And that's what I'm trying to remind my managers. You go and look at your critical skills, and if they do not have an active acknowledgement of debt, you should be worried, and you should proactively be having those conversations. And let's be honest, in the tech space especially, we're talking about scarce skills, any company that is worthwhile you move into would take over that training debt. So I don't believe it's a prohibitive. But I think it is something that managers, and even from a data analytics point of view, that we should be looking at in our type of organization. If the person doesn't have an acknowledgement of debt and they're a technical resource, then I'd be worried.
To reframe that differently and help me if I get this wrong, what you're actually saying is the moment someone stops proactively learning might be an indicator of them planning on leaving.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct. Because people
that is a
don't
very
have
cool way to look at it.
people don't want to go and have that new employer talk about my training debt and all the rest. So if they are looking outside or being approached, that is something people naturally don't want to have those conversations.
Yeah.
So if people are planning this sort of conversation, and look, we are an organization where we do a lot of rehires as well, a huge amount of rehires. I was looking at some stats the other day, probably between a third and a quarter of our people joining are rehires. They've been with us before and they're coming back.
They're coming back. That's fascinating. So if we summarize strategy, so firstly, from your perspective, again, no right or wrong. This is what you guys are doing. This is what you're seeing. This is your opinion. One, make it available for everybody. Have it as a strategic initiative. Make sure that, especially in a technical environment, the device that the candidate can do it on, makes sense. Mobile, of course, from a Whamley perspective as well. It wouldn't make sense for a video interview not to be able to be done on mobile. That's just the world we live in. It's not a top-down, the manager telling the employee to do it. It's self-driven. That is part of the larger culture in the organization. So I can imagine when you hire, you are looking for competencies around learning, as an inherent behavioral trait that someone has got. And then, of course, once in doing that, one, yes, it's going to help me in my job, but two, it's also part of the conversation in the other HR touch points.
It is. It's definitely part of the conversation. Learning is an inherent requirement of pretty much all of our jobs, and managers, line managers, people managers, you must know your people. So you need to know your people, and then you can point them in direction. Because we do find there is so much available.
Yes.
Where do people start? And that can be a little bit overwhelming. But then there's lots of support offered for those who need guidance.
And that's a perfect segue into my next question, and that is how. So I mean, if you use the word overwhelmed, if I think of learning, I mean Google, YouTube, LinkedIn, books, TED Talks, podcasts, webinars, like, oh my word, courses, formal, informal, international, local. Like, it's just this massive, massive, massive abyss out there. And so how do we leverage technology to create some clarity and direction around that?
There's a huge amount of tech available. I think even with children, children have different learning styles. They have different needs, different wants. They enjoy certain things. I've converted, because I'm more in the office now than I was probably a year or two ago.
Hashtag eyeball.
Exactly. I have, and I do a lot more audiobooks because that keeps me focused in the traffic. So you need to do what works for the individual as well. So be flexible. But you're not going to have one item that suits everyone. So some people are going to need coursework. Some people are going to want to do it after hours. Some people are going to want to do a live webinar. Some will rather want to do recorded. You need to account and allow for those various options because people are individuals and they have individual 100%. Learning styles.
If I am in the audience as an employer and a decision maker, what I would take from that is allow for the flexibility to meet individuals where they're at. Because as you rightfully said, we have different styles, we have different preferences. And often when we are too strict around development, I think we're missing the point behind it. If Johnny needs to read a book and that's going to increase his effectiveness in his job, allow him to read the book. And if Sarah or Tibor needs to go for, that online course, again, what does the individual require? What does the organization require? What does the job require? And be flexible around the approach. I think too often we try and box it because we're either too theoretical or we have our own opinion around how it must be done, or this is how we do it in our organization. And I think the value at the end of the day then just doesn't get seen. It doesn't pull through to the ROI. And the individual's engagement is not going up with the learning content, which is ultimately the point.
Which is ultimately the point. So I suppose in the old past, when we were slightly a bit less tech savvy, we would talk about blended learning and a blended learning approach. I suppose this is like a blended learning approach, but almost blended to an individual level.
Yes, yes. I do also believe, and it circles a bit back to our intro, and that is as an individual, irrespective of your job, listening to this pod, I think a great place to start is also to go and identify, where do you think you lack? Or where do you find your energy, curiosity, and attention going to? And then chase that. Go and be curious around that and see the effect that it can have. Learning very often gets seen, we learn in glances, or we learn in these blocks, or we learn in these weeks or these days. But the point of continuous learning is take the pressure off. It's not something that you need to finish. It will forever be there. Manage your curiosity on the journey.
Yeah, it's not modularized, and we obviously career pathing is very important, but career pathing is very different today. You don't go from one level to the next level to the next level. It's a different journey for every individual. So we've had people go from receptionist into HR. We've had people go from legal into sales, technical into non-technical, procurement into technical. There's lots of different journeys, and every person's journey will be different. And while there is obviously minimum requirements for certain roles and what have you, what's more important is how does that team's group of skills complement that team to make sure that team is performing at its highest level. And it's difficult to do en masse when you're talking, even in South Africa, we're talking about 2,000 to 4,000 people. It's difficult. But again, it goes back to that level of intimacy that you need to know your people. You, as a manager, you need to know your people, what makes them tick, what they're going to enjoy, what is their journey, what are their goals, and then you kind of try and match that.
Yeah, and I think your last comment around, career progression, career path planning, that for me is in the same theme as development, where it is self-directed. I often get asked, what are the indicators of success for individuals? And, one of the competencies that just always come to mind is this initiative. I'm a self-starter. I'm directing my growth, my learning, my career. I'm curious around where it can go. I'm not necessarily dead set on one path, but as long as I have that daily habits, those daily focus points around learning, growing, being curious, chasing, almost let the outcome be more vague than the process.
Yes. And what some of our very senior technical resources, they'll go, oh, well, what's the next thing? And I'll say to them, well, I don't know. Like, it depends on where the industry is going to go.
What do you want it to be?
And
what
do you want it to be? You can influence, you're going to self-direct, you building things with clients. That's where your career is. You determining that. And that's quite exciting.
That is very exciting. Kim, parting thoughts for the audience around continuous learning and improvement. What would you like to leave them with?
Just keep doing it. And as I said, the world is changing, it's adapting. If you're going to stay relevant, and you want job security, the best job security is to be your ability to adapt, change, and engage with where is your industry going? What is the value that you're going to bring? And then match that, because it's going to change all the time. And just make sure that you are on the path, or your organization is in the path to make yourself future fit. Otherwise, you are going to be left behind.
100%.
And it's an inherent job requirement, and it's difficult for even some of our graduates. Like, you don't finish university and stop learning. Your learning is only now beginning.
I was just about to say, now it's starting. Kim, thank
Now
you
it's
so much for your
starting.
insights. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for being bold around sharing practical examples in your organization. It's been great catching up and having this conversation with you. I know the audience will get a lot of value from it. I did. It'll definitely make me think about how we are approaching learning at WAMNY as well. So thank you so much for your time and your input.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.